Usually when we talk about diagnosing a problem, there is this underlying expectation of precision, like engineering.
Right, exactly, like a machine.
Yeah. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the radius bone, and the doctor just points at the film and says, there it is, there's the fracture.
It's binary, it's visible. I mean, we have this fundamental human craving for things to be categorized neatly into working or broken.
But then you step into the world of human behavior, and suddenly that x-ray machine just shatters.
Oh, completely.
We start looking for a clean, logical diagnostic tool to explain why people do what they do, and we end up staring at a landscape that completely defies standard logic.
Which is incredibly frustrating for people who like spreadsheets.
Exactly. So, for you listening right now, welcome to today's deep dive. Today's source material, Rory Sutherland's book Alchemy, argues that looking for a clean, logical x-ray of human decision-making is actually the most irrational thing you can do.
Yeah, the book's core premise is really fascinating. It argues that the modern world is obsessed with technocratic, spreadsheet-driven solutions, but human behavior is actually driven by this hidden operating system.
And underlying psychologic.
Exactly, psychologic.
Okay, well, let's unpack this. We are going to extract the fundamental axioms of this text, analyze the evolutionary mechanisms behind our weirdest, most counterintuitive behaviors, and build some practical mental models for you.
Because the goal here is to help you navigate a world that makes a lot more sense once you realize it isn't supposed to make any sense at all.
Right, so where do we even begin with this?
Well, my analytical framework for this is going to cross some major disciplinary boundaries. I mean, we really have to pull from behavioral economics, evolutionary biology, and cognitive psychology.
So that's a lot of ground to cover.
It is, but it's necessary because what the source material reveals quite forcefully is that the conscious mind, the part of you that is currently listening to this and thinks it is in charge of your life, isn't actually the commander-in-chief of your actions.
Wait, so who is?
It's more of a post hoc rationalization engine. It's desperately trying to make sense of subconscious drives that have already made the decision milliseconds, or even evolutionary eons before you were aware of them.
So if standard logic, like the kind that builds bridges and writes software, is fundamentally broken when applied to human behavior, what exactly is the architecture of this psychologic the author is proposing?
We have to start by deconstructing the fundamental axiom of the text. Basically, human decisions are deeply context-dependent, and they are shaped by unconscious emotional processes rather than the sterile, calculated logic of traditional economics.
Because the classical economic model assumes that you and I are perfectly rational actors, right?
Right. Homo economicus. It assumes we wake up every day and consciously maximize our utility, calculating the exact cost-benefit ratio of every calorie we consume and every dollar we spend.
Which is demonstrably false the moment you look at, say, a line of people waiting 3 hours to buy a sneaker that costs $400. Especially when a $40 sneaker performs the exact same mechanical function.
That's exactly the point. The text explicitly rejects the assumption that rationality is the primary driver of human choices. There's a brilliant framing in the book that cuts right to the evolutionary reality.
Oh, about the accountants.
Yes. If pure calculating rationality were the ultimate evolutionary advantage, accountants would be the sexiest people on Earth.
That concept forces you to completely reevaluate what we consider valuable traits. I mean, if human evolution favored strict resource conservation and perfectly logical risk assessment, human attraction would naturally gravitate toward people who never take risks.
Right, people who hoard resources meticulously and who never engage in wasteful displays.
But instead, society elevates rock stars, athletes, and entrepreneurs, people who take massive, often illogical risks and engage in highly visible, expensive displays of status.
Because in the Pleistocene epoch, where our neurological hardware was actually forged, survival wasn't about perfectly balancing a spreadsheet. It was about signaling genetic fitness.
So a rock star taking a massive social and physical risk is demonstrating a surplus of energy.
Exactly. From a biological standpoint, risk-taking and extravagance are proxies for robustness. The proposed model of the text is that value is entirely perceptual, not intrinsic.
So a thing doesn't have a set mathematical value based on its material components.
No, its value exists solely in how a human mind perceives it within a specific emotional and social context.
This brings us to the illusion of rational control. The text uses an analogy that the conscious mind likes to think it is the Oval Office. Sitting behind the resolute desk, carefully weighing the intelligence reports and calling the shots.
But in reality, the conscious mind is the press office.
Right.
It just stands at the podium after the fact, spinning, justifying, and rationalizing decisions that were already made behind closed doors by the subconscious.
The implications of that are staggering if you pause to consider them. If our conscious mind is just a press secretary, it means we don't even have access to our own true motivations.
We are functionally strangers to our own decision-making processes.
Yet we walk around confidently narrating our lives, explaining why we bought that car or why we married that person, as if we derive those answers from a mathematical formula.
It's less like a commander giving orders and more like, well, it's like an algorithm generating subtitles for a foreign movie in real time.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, the subconscious mind has already shot the scene, the actors are moving, the emotions are playing out, and the conscious mind is just scrambling to put text at the bottom of the screen that makes the plot look intentional.
But let me push back on this critique of logic for a second.
Sure.
If logic built the modern world, if Newtonian physics and calculus allowed us to put a rover on Mars, and the internet allows us to broadcast this conversation to you right now, why is the author claiming it is so incredibly dangerous to rely on logical frameworks?
Well, the text isn't anti-logic in the realm of physics or engineering. Sutherland's critique is aimed squarely at the technocratic elite.
You mean policymakers, economists, corporate strategists?
Exactly. People who suffer from an over-reliance on what he calls dishwasher-proof frameworks when dealing with human beings. The danger arises when you try to force a psychological problem into a logical framework.
It's like trying to solve the Rubik's Cube, where the colors change based on your mood.
That's a great way to put it. When technocrats try to predict human behavior using algorithms, assuming people will act rationally to maximize utility, they fail spectacularly.
Because they strip away the emotional and situational variables.
Right, the context that actually dictates how a human being will react.
They try to solve human problems as if humans were predictable molecules in a chemistry experiment.
Logic is brilliant for physics, but it is disastrous for psychology. Look at public transport. If you want to make a train journey more efficient, logic says you spend $2 billion to upgrade the physical tracks so the train goes 10% faster.
But human beings don't actually care about the objective speed of the train.
No, they care about the subjective experience of the commute. By ignoring the psychological reality, technocrats waste billions solving the wrong problem.
Which means we need to understand how humans actually construct their reality. And the source material leans heavily into psychophysics to explain this.
Yes, psychophysics is key here.
So if we accept that our perception of reality is totally distinct from objective physics, how does the brain actually bridge that gap? The phrase used in the text is, "the map is not the territory."
Right. Psychophysics is the study of the relationship between physical stimuli and the sensations and perceptions they produce. It provides a really deep insight into evolutionary biology, which is that human perception is profoundly elastic.
So we have to discard the idea that our eyes and ears are passive video cameras recording an objective reality.
Completely. Our evolutionary survival did not depend on seeing the world accurately. It depended on perceiving the world in a way that kept us alive.
This is essentially evolutionary error management theory, right? The smoke detector principle. Like if you are an early hominid walking through the savannah and you hear a rustle in the tall grass, you have two choices. You can use objective logic stop, gather data, analyze the wind patterns, and determine if it's a lion or just a breeze.
Or you can use psychologic, assume it's a deadly predator, and run for your life immediately.
And the hominid who used objective logic got eaten while he was gathering data.
Precisely. The one who relied on a fast, highly biased, inaccurate heuristic survived to pass on his genes. Being overly cautious and having deeply ingrained cognitive biases literally served our survival.
Therefore, the sensory experiences you are having right now are heavily filtered and altered by prior experiences, emotional states, and biological imperatives.
We do not experience physical reality. We experience a subjective biological interpretation of it.
The Cadbury chocolate case study from the sources illustrates this multisensory illusion perfectly.
Oh, I love this example.
So Cadbury decided to change the physical shape of their classic chocolate bars. They rounded off the sharp rectangular corners.
Right, but they didn't alter the recipe, the sugar content, or the chemical composition in any way.
It was physically the exact same chocolate. But immediately after the newly shaped bars hit the shelves, consumers revolted, complaining that Cadbury had ruined the recipe by making it far too sweet.
It's a masterclass in psychophysics. The visual and tactile cues, how the chocolate looked to the eye and how it melted on the tongue due to the rounded shape, inadvertently altered the biological perception of taste.
Wait, really? Just the shape?
Yes. In nature, roundness is visually associated with ripeness and sweetness, while angularity is associated with bitterness or danger. The visual cortex processed the round shape, sent a predictive signal to the gustatory cortex, and literally pre-computed the taste as sweeter before the chemical receptors on the tongue even fully engaged.
So the brain gaslit the taste buds.
That is exactly what happened. The physical reality of the chocolate was identical, but the psychological reality, the taste experienced by the consumer, had fundamentally changed.
If you were a technocrat looking at a spreadsheet of the ingredients, you would tell the consumers they are objectively wrong.
But psychologic dictates that if the consumer perceives it as sweeter, the subjective reality is that it is sweeter. Perception dictates reality.
So if our taste buds are essentially being overridden by our visual cortex based on evolutionary associations with shape, what does that say about our eyes?
Well, that gets into some really weird territory.
Yeah, the text brings up this bizarre but illuminating concept of the television for a pet monkey.
It sounds absurd, but it deconstructs the illusion of objective sight perfectly. Think about the colors a television screen produces. When you look at a screen and see a bright yellow sun or a deep purple flower, the television is not actually emitting yellow or purple light.
Right, a standard screen only emits red, green, and blue light. The pixels are just RGB.
Exactly. The colors yellow and purple as you experience them looking at that screen are biological phenomena, not physical ones. They exist purely in your perception.
That's wild to think about.
It is. They are an optical illusion created by how your specific human retinas process the combination of red, green, and blue light, and how your visual cortex stitches that data together.
Which means if you bought a television for a pet monkey, or a dog, or a bird whose eyes have completely different biological hardware and photoreceptors, they wouldn't see the same picture at all.
They might just see a mess of flashing blue and red dots. The beautiful picture only exists because of the specific software running in a human brain.
The value, the meaning, and the reality of the image are entirely constructed by the observer.
And if our most basic perception of color is a constructed biological interface, then trying to solve complex human social problems with pure physical logic is just a fool's errand. You are trying to fix the hardware when the problem is in the software.
But this raises a massive existential problem. If our perception of reality is this subjective, easily manipulated, and completely decoupled from objective physics, how do we ever build trust?
That is the million-dollar question.
If I can't even trust my own mouth to tell me how sweet a piece of chocolate is, how do humans form functioning societies? How do we know who is a cooperator and who is a scammer?
This brings us to the evolutionary mechanism of costly signaling. This is how biology solves the problem of trust in a world of deception. To understand this, the text ties human behavior directly back to Darwin's theory of sexual selection.
Because in the animal kingdom, you constantly observe extravagant, seemingly wasteful traits that make no logical sense for survival.
Right. The classic example being the peacock's tail.
Yeah. From a strict survival of the fittest, logical standpoint, growing a giant, heavy, brightly colored tail that you have to drag through the jungle is a terrible idea.
It is an enormous liability.
It requires massive metabolic energy to grow, it makes you incredibly visible to predators, and it physically slows you down when you need to run away.
But it serves a vital evolutionary purpose. It is a mathematically unforgeable signal of genetic fitness. The peacock is effectively communicating to the peahen. I have such incredibly robust genes, I am so resistant to parasites, and I am so fast that I can afford to waste massive amounts of energy growing this ridiculous tail and I still survive.
The costliness of the signal is what makes it trustworthy. A weak or sick bird literally cannot grow that tail without dying.
Exactly. The biological cost is the authentication mechanism, and the text also brings up mutualism between different species, specifically bees and flowers.
Oh, right. Flowers are engaging in botanical costly signaling.
They are. They expend huge amounts of energy and water, producing vibrant pigments and complex aromatic compounds. They are establishing a biological brand identity to attract pollinators.
This isn't just about looking pretty, it's an economic transaction. The flowers invest in capital up front.
Yes. The flower invests heavily in an extravagant signal to guarantee to the bee that flying all the way over will be worth the metabolic cost. The costliness of the flower's display proves its commitment to the transaction, ensuring the bee gets nectar and the flower gets pollinated.
So how does this biological mandate for waste and extravagance translate to human behavior and modern business strategy. Because, we like to think we are above peacocks and flowers when we operate in the free market.
We operate on the exact same hardware. Think about it. Why do you intrinsically trust a lavish, thick cardstock, embossed wedding invitation sent through the mail more than a generic text message that says, "Hey, getting married on Saturday, hope you can make it"?
From an information theory perspective, the data transmitted is identical. Date, time, location.
But the emotional weight is completely different.
Because the physical mailer signifies commitment through cost. The couple had to spend real money, time, and effort to design, print, and ship that invitation. They have skin in the game.
And the cheap text message costs nothing, so it signals nothing. Human consumerism and social interaction constantly prioritize status and display over rational efficiency because of this.
This explains why corporate headquarters have massive, inefficient marble lobbies, or why people buy heavily branded luxury watches when a $10 digital watch keeps better time.
It's a necessary waste. It fosters trust by signaling what the text calls a continuation probability.
Continuation probability, that's a great term.
It is the key metric. If a company is willing to waste millions of dollars on a Super Bowl ad or on building a flagship store on Fifth Avenue, your subconscious assumes they plan on being around for the long haul.
A fly-by-night scammer selling defective products wouldn't waste capital on those costly signals because they intend to take the money and run.
Exactly. The costliness proves the intention to remain in the market.
But we have to look at this critically, using the contrarian perspective the text provides. Does signaling always guarantee truth?
No, and that's a really important nuance.
The sources reference the work of economists Michael Spence and George Akerlof, who point out that signaling can actually be manipulated. It can be weaponized for deception.
It is crucial to apply friction to this theory. While Sutherland argues that costly signaling builds fundamental trust, Spence and Akerlof's work, particularly Akerlof's Market for Lemons, warns us that signals can be hacked.
All right.
In biology, you have parasitic birds like the cuckoo, which lays its eggs in another bird's nest. The cuckoo chick hatches, mimics the costly begging signals of the host's actual chicks, and tricks the host parents into feeding it.
It's biological fraud.
Exactly. And in human markets, a company could secure venture capital funding, spend a fortune on a lavish marketing campaign and a beautiful website to signal premium quality while secretly hollowing out the supply chain and delivering a terrible product.
They fake the continuation probability.
So while costly signaling operates as a powerful subconscious heuristic for trust, it is not an absolute law. The signal is a proxy for reality, and proxies can be counterfeited.
This is where the framework takes a massive turn inward. It's one thing to understand that we use expensive, illogical signals to prove to other people that we aren't scammers. But the absolute weirdest phenomenon in human psychology is that we use these exact same mechanisms to trick ourselves.
We signal to our own subconscious.
You are entering the territory of subconscious hacking and the placebo effect. If the conscious mind is just a press office, it means you can't simply logic yourself into a different emotional or physiological state.
You can't just look in the mirror and command your body to stop feeling pain or command your brain to feel confident. You have to send a signal that the Oval Office, the subconscious, will respect.
And often that requires the deployment of a placebo. I was looking at the Nurofen data in the sources, and it completely broke my previous understanding of medicine.
Oh, the Nurofen study is incredible.
So Nurofen is a painkiller. Chemically, its active ingredient is identical to standard generic ibuprofen. If you put them in a mass spectrometer, they're the same drug. Yet, rigorous data shows that the branded, specific, heavily marketed, and higher-priced Nurofen actually relieves pain better for the patient. My initial logical thought was that people are just lying on the surveys to justify spending more money.
But they aren't lying. The pain relief is demonstrably physiologically real. This is where technocratic logic completely fails to understand human biology.
Because standard logic says, identical chemical equals identical pain relief.
But human biology is an integrated system of psychology and chemistry. The brain has a predictive coding network. When you ingest a pill, your brain uses environmental cues to predict how strong the effect will be, and it physically prepares the body by releasing endogenous opioids.
The body's natural painkillers.
Exactly.
So the high price, the slick metallic packaging, the aggressive branding, those aren't just marketing tools. They are medical ingredients.
The costliness of the medication signals to your subconscious that this is a serious, potent intervention. Just like the peacock's tail, the expense commands respect from the nervous system.
The subconscious registers the high cost. and triggers a massive placebo response.
Literally dialing down the pain receptors in the brain. If you take a cheap, generic, unbranded white pill out of a flimsy plastic bottle, the subconscious doesn't register a costly signal, the predictive network anticipates a weak effect, and it releases fewer natural painkillers.
The irrational action of paying 5 times more for the same chemical produces a highly rational outcome.
Oh,
Feel less pain. And we do this subconscious hacking in our everyday lives, completely outside of the pharmacy.
Oh, constantly.
The text talks about grooming rituals, military regalia, and buying luxury goods. When someone spends an hour applying makeup in a very specific sequence, or meticulously shines their shoes before a big meeting, it's not just about looking good for other people.
It is an emotional regulation mechanism.
Yep.
It is an internal placebo. When a soldier puts on a formal uniform covered in medals, it physically alters their posture, their cortisol levels, and their risk tolerance.
By engaging in a meticulous, time-consuming, or expensive ritual, you are bypassing the conscious mind.
You are signaling directly to your nervous system, I am prepared, I have status, I am in control.
The ultimate corporate archetype of this subconscious hacking, according to the sources, is Red Bull. This is a fascinating deconstruction of how to build an empire on pure psychologic.
Red Bull is the perfect case study.
If you hired a prestigious consulting firm and asked them, how do we create a new beverage to rival Coca-Cola? What would the spreadsheet logic dictate?
The spreadsheet would demand optimization. It would say, consumer surveys show people like sweet things and low prices. Therefore, to beat Coca-Cola, you must engineer a drink that tastes sweeter and more universally pleasing than Coke, and you must sell it in a larger bottle for less money to maximize consumer utility.
But Red Bull did the exact opposite, and it made them billionaires. They engineered a drink that has a harsh, almost medicinal, unappealing taste. They put it in a tiny, restrictive can, and they charged a massive premium for it.
It violates every law of traditional market logic.
Why does it work so well then?
Because Red Bull isn't competing on taste or volume, it is competing on the placebo effect of energy. It hacks the autonomic nervous system. Think about the associative learning of the human brain. In nature, sweet things are safe carbohydrates. Bitter, harsh tastes are associated with potent alkaloids, toxins, or medicines.
So when you drink something that tastes like battery acid and cough syrup, your brain thinks it's ingesting a powerful chemical compound.
Precisely. The unpalatable taste triggers a mild autonomic arousal, a fight-or-flight response. The brain says, this tastes like medicine, it comes in a tiny restricted dose like medicine, and it costs a lot of money like medicine. It must be doing something extreme to my physiology.
Which triggers an adrenaline and dopamine release that is completely independent of the actual caffeine content in the can.
Exactly. If Red Bull tasted like a delicious, cheap strawberry soda, it would completely fail to deliver the psychological jolt of energy, even with the exact same caffeine content.
The friction is the feature. Which brings us to a terrifying realization. If the modern world is obsessed with optimizing everything, if we demand that all medicine is generic, all interfaces are frictionless, all drinks are cheap and sweet, and all packaging is minimalist, we are systematically stripping away the friction.
The rituals and the costly placebos that our brains literally require to function optimally.
That is the devastating hidden cost of a purely technocratic society. When you optimize exclusively for the spreadsheet, you delete the psychological magic.
You create an environment that is perfectly efficient for machines, but completely alien and stressful for the human nervous system.
And this conflict between optimization and human reality directly informs how we make decisions in the wild. We don't optimize, we satisfice.
Satisficing is such an important concept here.
The text leans heavily on Herbert Simon's concept of satisficing. The central conflict here is framed as being vaguely right versus precisely wrong.
Oh.
What exactly is the cognitive strategy of satisficing, and why is it superior to maximizing?
Well, satisficing is a portmanteau of satisfy and suffice. It is a heuristic, a mental shortcut. When faced with a decision, a satisficer searches through the available alternative only until they find an option that meets their baseline acceptability threshold, and then they stop searching.
And a maximizer.
A maximizer, on the other hand, exhaustively evaluates every single possible option to ensure they are making the absolute, mathematically perfect choice.
Think about the last time you spent 45 minutes scrolling through Netflix trying to find the absolute perfect, optimal movie to watch.
Oh, we've all done that.
You evaluate the Rotten Tomatoes scores, the runtimes, and the directors until you were so exhausted you just go to sleep. you were trying to maximize.
Right. If you had just satisficed and picked the first comedy that looked good enough, you actually would have enjoyed your evening.
That is a perfect mundane example of the danger of maximizing. The reason we evolved to satisfice comes down to the stark difference between narrow context problems and wide context problems.
Yes. A narrow context problem is a game of chess. The rules are permanently fixed, the boundaries of the board are visible, and there are no hidden variables. In a narrow context, you can use pure computational logic to find the optimal, perfect move.
But human life, biology, and the economy are not games of chess.
Not at all. They are wide context environments. The rules constantly change, the variables are infinite, other actors are deceiving you, and hidden factors are everywhere.
If an early human gatherer spent 3 hours trying to calculate the absolute optimal, mathematically perfect path through a dense forest to minimize calorie expenditure,
They would be eaten by a leopard while doing the math. It is biologically imperative to find a path that is good enough to get you to the water source quickly. Seeking perfection in a wide context world introduces fatal delays and fragile assumptions.
which perfectly explains why the text points to the 2008 global financial crisis as the ultimate catastrophic failure of relying purely on mathematical maximization over human satisficing.
The 2008 crisis is the definitive case study of being precisely wrong. The financial derivatives that crashed the global economy were engineered by some of the most brilliant physicists and mathematicians on Earth. They built highly optimized, mathematically flawless risk algorithms.
They were playing chess.
Yes, they assumed the housing market was a narrow context game. They maximized for short-term yield with incredible computational precision. But they were deploying those algorithms in a wide context world driven by human greed, fear, regulatory capture, and systemic fragility.
Because their models ignored the unquantifiable psychologic of human panic, their flawless math blew up the global economy.
Exactly. A group of seasoned, satisficing bank managers using vague intuition and rule-of-thumb risk aversion would have never allowed the system to become that over-leveraged.
The text uses a great, highly relatable metaphor for this danger, the GPS algorithm. Imagine you are driving in a new city and your GPS tells you to suddenly veer off the main highway and take a bizarre detour down a narrow, unpaved alleyway that runs behind an industrial park.
It's telling you to do this because its algorithm, which is maximizing for distance, calculated that this route is exactly 12 feet shorter.
The machine is maximizing for a single metric with perfect precision.
But as a human driver, you look at that dark alleyway and your evolutionary intuition kicks in.
Your satisficing heuristic says, no, that looks dangerous. There might be a delivery truck blocking the way or a pothole that ruins my tire. I'm just going to stay on the main, well-lit road, even if it takes 60 seconds longer.
If you blindly submit to the maximizing algorithm of the GPS, you ignore the wide context risks of the real world.
The author isn't arguing that we should throw away the GPS or delete the risk models, though, right?
No, not at all. The argument is that logical models and algorithms must complement human intuition, not override it. We must preserve our ability to make vague, satisfactory decisions because human intuition acts as a buffer against the hidden complexities and extreme tail risks that strict computation cannot foresee.
So we've built this massive theoretical architecture. We've established that perception overrides physical reality, that signals must be costly to generate trust, that we require irrational placebos to regulate our own physiology, and that good enough satisficing is a vital survival tool.
That's a lot, I know.
But how do we take this out of the realm of philosophy and actually apply it? How do we use psychologic to generate asymmetric advantages in the real world?
This is the strategic application layer of the text. The overarching strategy, whether you are designing a product, marketing a service, or trying to improve your own life, is to stop trying to solve the physical problem with expensive logical brute force.
Instead, you identify the leverage points where a small, seemingly irrational tweak to human perception yields a massive asymmetric result.
Exactly. You must solve the psychological problem.
Let's run through some of the most compelling case studies from the text. I want to start with the train example because it is the most elegant demonstration of this principle. The physical problem is, the train commute takes too long and people hate it.
Right. And the physical technocratic solution is to spend $2 billion relaying tracks and upgrading engines to make the journey 10 minutes faster.
What is the psychological solution?
Well, you have to ask why the passengers hate the commute. The psychological problem isn't actually the duration of the trip. People happily sit in a movie theater for 2 hours. The psychological pain comes from the anxiety of uncertainty while waiting on the platform.
When you don't know when the train is coming, your brain is in a state of hypervigilance. Time feels agonizingly slow, and cortisol levels rise.
You feel a loss of control.
Exactly. So the asymmetric psychological solution is to spend a few $1,000,000, a tiny fraction of the cost of new tracks, to install digital countdown boards on every platform.
Yeah.
Train arriving in 4 minutes.
And suddenly the anxiety evaporates. The physical wait time might be identical, but the perception of the wait is transformed. The brain can relax, check an email, or read a book because the uncertainty has been resolved.
You have created immense value out of almost nothing simply by changing the informational environment. That is brilliant.
It really is.
What about the example of the 50-pound new car? This perfectly illustrates how psychophysics can save you an enormous amount of money.
This happens to everyone. You've owned your car for 5 years. It feels old, the seats are dull, the steering wheel feels sticky, and the cabin smells stale.
The conscious mind, the press office, rationalizes this by saying the engine is probably losing power, the suspension is shot, it's time for a logical upgrade.
The physical solution is to take on $30,000 of debt to buy a brand new vehicle.
But the psychological solution relies on hacking your own sensory habituation.
You take the car and spend 50 pounds or dollars to get it professionally, deeply detailed, inside and out. Steam clean the upholstery, polish the dashboard, ozone treat the air conditioning.
The psychophysics of the new car smell, the visual cue of shiny surfaces, and the tactile feel of a clean steering wheel trick the brain's predictive network.
The brain associates those pristine sensory inputs with a new high-performance machine. The perception of value is instantly restored, the car literally feels faster and smoother to drive, and you achieve that state shift for $50 instead of $30,000.
The asymmetry there is incredible. The text also touches on digital environments, specifically e-commerce, which is supposed to be the most ruthlessly logical space in the world, but psychologic still dominates. The checkout button case study.
Oh, this is a classic lesson in cognitive friction and satisficing. A major e-commerce website was forcing users to create a registered account before they could complete a purchase. From a logical corporate perspective, this makes perfect sense.
Capture the user's data so you can market to them later and maximize lifetime value.
But from the user's perspective, it feels like signing a marriage certificate on a first date.
It creates massive psychological friction. Creating an account forces the user to shift from a narrow context task, buying a shirt, into a wide context decision about managing a new password and enduring future spam.
The asymmetric solution was adding a single, trivial digital button. Continue as guest.
A completely irrational move from the data maximizing perspective.
But it respects the user's desire to satisfy us. It removes the commitment tax. That single button, which took a programmer an hour to code, resulted in an immediate multi-million-dollar increase in completed sales.
The physical mechanics of the website barely changed, but the psychological landscape for the buyer was cleared of landmines.
Exactly.
There is one more business example that feels particularly relevant today, and it's deeply counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Eco-friendly packaging. We have this societal push for sustainable products, but the text warns that making eco-friendly products look too authentically earthy or basic can severely backfire.
This loops right back to our discussion on costly signaling. Imagine an eco-friendly kitchen cleaner. The manufacturer decides to be perfectly logical and ethical. They put it in a thin, unbleached, unbranded brown cardboard bottle with a dull paper label.
The conscious mind of the consumer might look at that and say, ah, wonderful, they are minimizing their carbon footprint.
But the subconscious mind is looking at that bottle and running a completely different algorithm.
The subconscious relies on costly signals to assess quality and potency. It looks at the flimsy, cheap packaging and immediately heuristic matches it to weakness.
The subconscious concludes, if they didn't invest in a sturdy, premium bottle, the chemicals inside must be weak and ineffective. This won't clean my kitchen.
It generates profound psychological skepticism, completely undermining the ethical intent.
Yes, the lack of a costly signal creates a deficit of trust in the product's primary function. The asymmetric strategy here is that eco-friendly products must actually over-index on premium design cues.
They must use heavyweight, highly engineered, beautifully designed, sustainable materials so they don't trigger that subconscious rejection.
You have to satisfy the psychologic of potency first, or the ethical logic of sustainability will never get a chance to operate.
This exhaustive breakdown of our irrationality leads us to a profound meta-insight about who and what we are as a species. When you look at all these mechanisms, the cognitive biases, the optical illusions, the expensive signaling, the reliance on placebos, what does this imply about the fundamental nature of human intelligence?
It forces a philosophical reevaluation. In modern technocratic society, we are conditioned to view our emotional irrationality and our biases as defects. We view them as bugs in our software.
We constantly think, if only we could just be perfectly logical, cold, calculating machines, we would be a superior, flawless species.
But Sutherland's text makes the exact opposite argument. These things aren't bugs. They are the core operating system.
They're essential survival mechanisms. The survival value of bias is immeasurable.
True human intelligence isn't rooted in mathematical precision. A calculator can do that. Human intelligence is rooted in our ability to navigate a highly ambiguous, dangerous, rapidly changing, wide context world using fast heuristics, social signals, and emotional intuition.
Our flaws are what allow us to function when we don't have perfect information.
Exactly.
So if we synthesize all of this, how does the human mind actually construct meaning out of the chaos of existence?
We construct meaning through narrative, through physical ritual, and through post hoc rationalization. We experience the world through highly filtered perception, we make messy decisions based on intuition, placebos, and luck, and then the press office of our conscious mind writes a logical, coherent story about it using hindsight bias.
We act first and we rationalize later.
Always.
And the ultimate meta insight of the book is that by acknowledging this, by abandoning our rigid, obsessive adherence to pure logic, we unlock something incredibly powerful. The text calls it magic.
Psychological magic. It is the ability to create immense value out of nothing but shifted perception. If you restrict yourself to using pure logic, you can only create value by physically altering reality, building faster trains, mining more resources, creating new chemicals.
And altering physical reality is slow, expensive, and ecologically damaging.
But if you embrace psychologic, you can create massive value simply by altering how reality is perceived, which is often cheap, instantaneous, and infinitely scalable.
So if we are going to actually use this tomorrow morning, what are the actual levers we can pull? Based on this deep dive, we can extract 4 concrete mental models that you can apply immediately to your work, your relationships, and your own internal dialogue. Let's map these out.
The first mental model is the foundational principle, psychologic over logic. The core rule here is that when you're trying to solve a problem where a human being is the end user, you must optimize for emotional resonance and perception, not mechanical efficiency.
This is the train countdown board. You use this when designing a customer experience, when trying to resolve a complex interpersonal conflict with a partner, or when designing a public space.
If the physical reality is adequate but the emotional experience is poor, don't change the physics, change the perception.
However, you must be acutely aware of the failure mode. The failure mode is ignoring basic physical constraints. You cannot use psychologic to build an airplane wing. Gravity and aerodynamics do not care about human perception.
But once the plane is physically safe, you must use psychologic to make the passengers feel safe during turbulence.
Mental model number 2, the costly signal. The principle here is that meaning requires sacrifice. Talk is cheap, and therefore, in a world of infinite cheap information, talk is increasingly untrustworthy.
Action, waste, and effort are expensive and therefore trustworthy. You deploy this model when you need to establish deep, unshakable trust or prove continuation probability.
If you make a massive mistake at work or in a relationship, do not send a 3-paragraph apology text. That costs you nothing. Show up in person. Sacrifice your time and comfort.
When you are building a brand identity, do something demonstrably difficult or expensive that a low-effort scammer wouldn't bother replicating.
The failure mode here is wasting resources on signals that your target audience is blind to. If you spend millions developing an incredibly complex back-end software architecture to signal quality, but the end user only cares about the UI design, you've wasted your signal on the wrong metric.
Mental model number 3, placebo engineering. The principle is acknowledging that the packaging, the environment, the price, and the ritual are active components of the product's efficacy. They are not just marketing, they alter biology.
You can use this inward on yourself. If you are struggling with personal productivity, don't just tell yourself to work harder. Engineer a placebo. Create a highly specific, slightly inconvenient morning ritual, or set up a dedicated workspace that feels premium and serious.
Signal to your subconscious that it is time to focus. In business, use pricing and design to communicate the potency of your service.
The catastrophic failure mode of placebo engineering is using psychological hacks to mask underlying structural rot. You cannot placebo your way out of a severed artery.
A beautiful, heavily signaled, eco-friendly bottle cannot make up for a chemical formula that fundamentally does not clean. The core physical product must possess baseline functionality before the placebo can amplify it.
Finally, mental model number 4, strategic satisficing. The principle is to actively aim to be vaguely right rather than mathematically precisely wrong.
You apply this model in high uncertainty, wide context environments. When you are hiring a key executive, choosing a life partner, or making a 20-year financial investment, do not look for the spreadsheet perfect optimum.
The optimal choice on paper is usually fragile. Look for the robust, good enough option that has a wide margin of safety and can survive the unpredictable chaos of real life.
The failure mode here is applying satisficing heuristics to narrow context, highly defined scenarios that actually demand pure mathematical precision.
If you are a structural engineer calculating the load-bearing capacity of a suspension bridge, or an anesthesiologist calculating a drug dosage, do not satisfice. In those narrow contexts, you must maximize precision.
These 4 models give you a toolkit to navigate both the physical world of physics and the subjective world of human perception.
This has been a profound reorientation of how to view the world. By deconstructing alchemy, we've seen that true innovation, whether we are building a multi-billion-dollar company or just trying to be happier in our own lives, actually requires a leap away from pure reason.
It requires embracing the messy, beautifully irrational magic of the human mind.
Once you accept that reality is constructed, you gain the agency to start constructing it intentionally.
Exactly.
And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over. We have spent this entire hour detailing how human survival, creativity, trust, and evolutionary success fundamentally depend on our biases, our illogical costly signals, and this irrational magic.
It's what makes us who we are.
But look at the technological trajectory of the world we are building right now. We are increasingly outsourcing our decision-making, our dating, our hiring, and our investments to purely logical, maximizing AI algorithms.
These machines do not satisfice. They do not understand the placebo effect. They only know how to be perfectly, ruthlessly logical.
So the ultimate question is, as we hand the reins of our civilization over to these algorithmic engines of pure logic, are we systematically optimizing away the very irrationality that makes us human, innovative, and resilient in the first place? Are we building a world that is mathematically perfect but psychologically uninhabitable?
That might be the most critical question of our generation.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you catch yourself or someone else doing something completely illogical, don't just dismiss it as stupidity. Look a little closer at the context, because underneath that murky, irrational behavior, you might just find the exact psychological mechanism that kept our ancestors alive. We'll see you next time.